I was mentioning the United Nations, well, it was WHO, World Health Organization, which a friend of mine jokes is that just means it's in England and they call themselves World, but it's just a United Kingdom thing. It's 9:23. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I want to talk about their warnings about certain meats, and bacon is on their list. Bacon, apparently, these people don't want you to eat anymore. It's just, you're going to die someday. You're not going to live forever. But speaking of meat, we do want to mention, if you love the taste of meat, and who doesn't, really? I mean, even your vegetarians, they don't want to admit it, and they don't want to maybe eat it for whatever political reasons they have. But deep down in, they'd all like a big juicy steak. We've been telling you for a long time, speaking of meat, about high desert meat processing, where they process one animal at a time. What you bring in is what you're going to get back. Darren Van Horn, owner of High Desert Meat Processing in Twin Falls, Idaho, he has over 30 years' experience in the meat business. You can visit High Desert Meat Processing on Facebook, read reviews of other customers, give High Desert Meat Processing a call for all of your wild game and domestic processing needs. 734-9949. High Desert Meat does in-house smoking. Nothing gets shipped out. Specialty meats, jerky, pepperoni, salami, summer sausage, kielbasa. I love all these things. Breakfast sausage, brats, Polish dogs, hot dogs, and much more. USDA approved. Darren works closely with local beef growers and their programs to ensure quality meat. 734-9949. So these warnings came out. I first saw them over the weekend, and they got a lot of attention yesterday. We would have gotten to them, but of course we ran out of time. I've got some sound clips from some people reacting to this warning that we shouldn't be eating bacon, we shouldn't be eating hot dogs. Actually, they're telling you, don't eat any meat. What the heck? Just forget it. 9:25. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. This is David Warner. He's an American, and I'm saying that for a reason because you'll find out in just a moment why I'm saying it. He is a spokesman for the National Pork Producers, and here is his reaction to that ridiculous report.
There aren't any studies out there that have a causal link between eating, in this case, processed meat, and any kind of cancer. There are numerous studies out there. Some of them show that there is a risk. Many do not. So the science isn't settled on any of this.
I can remember 30 years ago or so somebody saying, if you're grilling hamburgers outside, you got to be careful because some of them will get a little bit charred and blackened on the edges, and that'll cause cancer and you'll die. And maybe it will, but 30 years later, after eating a lot of charbroiled hamburgers, I'm still here. And then I could die for a lot of other reasons. After all, I'm 53 and perhaps I need a little bit more exercise and the like. But I don't know that I'm going to give up hamburgers because of that. Eating a lot of them anyway. Keith Mills, he is the second voice you're going to be hearing from here. He owns a cafe in England. Now, there's some equipment running in the background, and the accent may be a little difficult to hear, but he's not impressed either.
It's just something else trying to scare us, from what I can gather. People have been eating this for years, bacon and sausage, and it's not killed off many of my customers, I don't think. But it is bad for trade as well when things like this are coming out.
In other words, he's saying it's bad for his business when they do this, but he said it hasn't killed many of my customers. Probably he hasn't seen any one of his customers keel over and die in the shop. In fact, one of his customers, a woman named Pamela, was questioned about it. And again, you're not finding anybody who's standing here saying, well, apparently they didn't go to a tofu convention.
I think most people, if you eat a cooked breakfast every day, yes, I can understand that. I don't. You don't. Occasionally don't hurt. I think it's everything in moderation.
Yeah, I don't sit there and eat bacon every day. It's tasty stuff, but it's not something that I do. Now, if I go pop into one of our local diners, and I have a couple of eggs over easy and some toast with that, and like to dip the toast into the eggs and then have a couple of pieces of bacon with that, you betcha. I was watching a McLaughlin Group a couple of weeks ago, and there's a character on the show, writes for National Review. His last name is Rogan, which is an Irish name, but he grew up in England. And he said one of the things that surprised him when he came to America was that Americans, he says, you eat bacon like it's candy. But apparently the English do as well after you heard the reactions from the last couple of people here. This is all part of a much larger program to eliminate a great deal of meat production around the world, not just in this country, but around the world. Way back in 2007, there was a woman working with the United Nations, and she issued a report saying that she wanted to limit people around the world to just 2 servings of meat per week. She's effectively talking about North Americans and Europeans who eat most of the meat in this world, and some people in Argentina, of course. She also wanted to ban alcohol because she said grain that could feed the poor around the world was going into alcohol production. And, of course, too many cattle are eating all of that grain as well, and if we all became vegetarians, we would so much better be able to redistribute all the grain around the planet, and then everyone would be so much better off. We could just sit around and eat Brussels sprouts and alfalfa sprouts and pour a little vinegar on them now and then, and that's the way we should all be living. Don't ever look at a study like the latest one coming out of the World Health Organization. Think that these are unrelated, because this is an ongoing propaganda effort to remove you from that dinner table where there is meat served. And they will, if they have the opportunity to do it, they will do it by force. We are seeing increasingly a totalitarian streak among these leftist do-gooders around the world, not just in the United States, and you can expect that that's on the way. So if you're a beef farmer, a chicken farmer, you're a hog farmer, they're coming for you. And it's getting to be a little bit frightening out there. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We used to eat a lot of bacon at home. Yeah, we had pigs and tasty, tasty stuff. And that Canadian-style stuff is pretty good too, you know. Gosh, you get a little bit of that, a little bit of capicola, Lebanon bologna, and you put it on a sandwich with a couple of slices of Tillamook cheese. Oh, that is just heaven. All right, see, I said there's a pattern going on today, and I think this is all part of a much, much wider conspiracy that is taking place when it comes to trying to control people around the world. And let me get to a bit more of that in just a moment, but I do want to remind you, if you're hearing us this morning, that's a great thing. If you're struggling to hear us this morning, I'd like you to give a telephone call to Mount Harrison Audiology, located at 1218th 9th Street, Unit Number 2, Rupert, Idaho. Telephone number is 208, of course, 312-0957. Or you can go online, mountharrisonaudiology.com. Dr. Christine Pickup will give you a hearing screening, and I'll tell you what, she could save you a lot of grief as you grow older. Hearing loss is strongly, sometimes it happens when you're young too, it's strongly associated with depression. When you struggle to follow a conversation or you politely nod because you don't understand what someone is talking about, you may decide it's easier to skip out that night with friends or the next family gathering. Stay connected with those you love. Hearing connects you with people and keeps you engaged in life. Don't let hearing loss keep you from enjoying your family and friends. Again, the doctor's telephone number, 208-312-0957. So the next other part of all of this, if they don't want you to eat meat, they have to come and seize all of your herds and shut all of that down. Talking about the people who are trying to ban meat, of course, in the last segment of the program. But they do realize that Americans are armed to the teeth. So there is now a concerted effort, or concerted as I hear it pronounced on public radio, effort to take your guns away. Not that this has ever, it's been the dream of the left for the last, 50 years. The New York Times carried this editorial yesterday. The foolhardy notion of quick-draw resistance, however, is dramatically contradicted by a research project showing that since 2007, at least 763 people have been killed in 579 shootings that did not involve self-defense. Tellingly, the vast majority of these concealed carry licensed shooters killed themselves or others rather than taking down a perpetrator. They're trying to tell you that concealed carry is a bad thing. Now, I don't live in New York City. I live in the Magic Valley in Idaho. I don't know how anybody there can actually make judgments about how people here live, but of course, they want everyone to live like them. The writer then goes on to say this. This is where the science gets a little questionable. But they're trying to ignore certain things. The writer says the death toll includes 29 mass killings of 3 or more people by concealed carry shooters who took 139 lives, 17 police officers shot to death, and in the ultimate contradiction of concealed carry as a personal safety factor, 223 suicides. Compared with 579 non-self-defense concealed carry shootings, there were only 21 cases in which self-defense was determined to be a factor. Now, when they mention the suicides, there's the old Archie Bunker line about people being killed with guns. He said, would it make you feel any better if they was pushed out of windows? People can commit suicide by taking a bottle of aspirin. No one is talking about banning aspirin or confiscating aspirin, at least not to my knowledge, not yet. So you have this, and you're thinking, wow, 29 concealed carry people went out and actually were involved in mass shootings. Well, what's a mass shooting? That is a shooting of more than one person. It can be two people. So you could have 29 shootings, and they could all involve two people. It could be a guy who gets into an argument with a neighbor who may also have a concealed carry permit, and he shoots the neighbor and his brother. So there you go. He's got a mass shooting on his hands. It's not necessarily a guy breaking into a community college classroom in Oregon and going in and methodically shooting people. Okay? We've got that clear. And that puke did not have a concealed carry permit, as we know. The Washington Post also cited the same numbers. Now, again, 29 mass shootings, as they say, which could be shootings involving just two people. But over at Breitbart, a writer by the name of A.W.R. Hawkins is mentioning the fact that the Washington Post actually did this very same follow-up. And he says, since there are currently 12.8 million concealed carry permit holders in America, the argument rests on the claim that that's a point like in a decimal point, 0.0002266% of permit holders were tied to mass shootings. So, all right, now they're saying, well, yeah, but 29 shootings and, there's 330 million people in this country. And as he pointed out, there's tens of millions of people with concealed carry. Where do you get such ridiculous numbers? The number of concealed carry permit holders, the writer says, in 2007 was 4.6 million. So if someone would rather work off the figure of 4.6 million instead of 12.8 million, and the number is quadrupled, as you know, you can tell by what I just said. He said it means that the percentage of concealed carry permit holders who allegedly carried out mass shootings would then be decimal point 0.0006304%. I mean, the numbers are so ridiculously small. Why are they making this argument at two of America's leading liberal newspapers? Because they want someone to take your guns away. And then I have this from the Washington Times. Tom Gresham, how web giants wage war against guns. They are coming for your firearms. They feel emboldened. They feel now is the time. They think they've had a great many successes. They've gotten same-sex marriage. They've gotten Obamacare. They're destroying Christianity. Now they think getting your gun, taking your gun away, that's their gold standard for liberalism. The writer says, these people have no recourse, however, to a massive censorship campaign currently underway. He's talking about people who actually own firearms, trade firearms. He says, one which blocks the free exchange of information as well as stifles commerce. This isn't the government at work, but is being done by giant companies that dominate the internet. Google, Twitter, PayPal, and Facebook all have established policies blocking ads and payments for guns, gun parts, gun accessories, or even optics that can be attached to firearms. These massive companies have become the superhighways, the interstates of web commerce. Blocking access to customers using these portals impacts companies large and small, the same as it would a retailer on a main thoroughfare that suddenly had its signs removed and faced a barrier shielding the view from the road. So, Lefty has all of his leftist Silicon Valley friends who run the web involved with this too, in order to try and take away your options for buying firearms or perhaps selling firearms and the like. You realize they're closing in, my friends, and it's not going to be pretty. 20 minutes away from 10 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And then the other step in all of this is simply to try and go along and provide us with anarchy in the streets. So then we can have to turn around and beg the government for a solution, which, of course, what do they say? Create the problem, amplify the problem, and then provide the solution. Talk a little bit about that coming up in just a few minutes. I mentioned it on the air before that former police commissioner of New York City, Ray Kelly, is an acquaintance of mine, simply because when his son was getting out of the Marine Corps and looking for a job in television news, he already had a background in radio news. I gave his son Greg his very first TV job. So I've known the family now for about, 15, 16 years. Great people. I want to get to some comments that the former police commissioner, in fact, commissioner twice, 2 different tenures in New York City, some comments he made about Black Lives Matter and what has become. It seems also when we talk about efforts to break the American culture down into just a series of anarchist movements that will then be controlled by something larger and more sinister, he's got some thoughts on that. But I do want to remind you, tomorrow morning we're going to be joined in studio by Dr. Jonathan Tripp or one of his associates from Trip Family Medicine, right here between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. We do this every Wednesday morning. In fact, we have a medical professional in studio who can sit here and take your telephone calls, and it's having a friendly voice that can simply give you some advice and point you in the right direction, whether it be something that ails you or a relative or even one of your close friends. So that's coming up tomorrow. We do that, Better Health with Trip Family Medicine, between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. We do want to remind you, if you're looking for Trip Family Medicine in the city, it's located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office. That's up there on the north side. And they would like to remind you, life's too short not to feel good. 9:43, Bill Colley with you this morning. It's 44. Thank you for joining us today on Top Story. And so I was talking a little bit about some of the efforts we've got going on in this country to try and, number one, take away the meat from your plate. Number two, lock you up for your Christian views. Number three, dilute your Christian faith by bringing in people from all over the world, especially the Muslim world. That's just what we've talked about so far this morning. And, of course, the ongoing efforts by media working in cahoots with its fellow travelers and government to try and take away your firearms. And we also have these people in government and many of their allies outside of government who are trying to foment violence between people on the streets and police officers. This is the former commissioner, I should say, of New York City Police Department, Ray Kelley, joining Sean Hannity on Fox News Channel. And the former commissioner is criticizing filmmaker Quentin Tarantino for making some rude comments about police officers at a Black Lives Matter event. Take a listen.
There's a rhetorical war on cops. There's a lot of verbiage out there. We saw Quentin Tarantino. That was absolutely disgraceful. And clearly cops feel at greater risk because of it, because of the rhetoric that's floating around. It's a dangerous job to begin with. We don't need that sort of talk out there. It doesn't help anything.
Yeah. Let me put up in a closed-door speech, the FBI director, James Comey, actually indicated police are now scared to do their jobs. Here's what he said. He said, you know, they told me we feel like we're under siege and we don't feel much like getting out of our cars. You still talk to the rank and file. You were so well respected in New York. Is that what you're hearing?
Yes, I think Jim Comey is telling it like it is. Clearly, police officers are hesitating. They're not engaging in the way they engaged for the last 2 decades, quite frankly. That's why crime is down significantly throughout the country. But, you know, police are backing off now. And anybody who denies that, I think, is just not facing reality.
And we heard it from people on the local level, too. I have talked, because I have a lot of police officers coming in and out the door here on the program, and I see them sometimes on the streets and the like, and I talk to them, and I understand what their concerns are. And some of them are telling me, and some of them have said it on the show. We had Captain Tim Miller from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department a few weeks ago on the program with us, saying 33 years he's been in law enforcement. He's not sure if he was a young guy that he would go ahead and do it any longer because of this climate that has been created. That's a frightening thing. A lot of very bright young people who want to do something good, serve the community, may decide they don't want to do that any longer. And we can't have that. I mean, that's, we start losing that pool of qualified candidates. Who's going to be there when you have a burglar trying to break down your back door at 2 o'clock in the morning? Speaking of Ray Kelley, who we just heard from on Sean Hannity's program, when I was working with his son, I actually had lunch with Al Sharpton one time, about 1990 or 1991. I sat down and actually shared chicken wings with Al Sharpton. And my experience was when I turned my microphone off, he stopped shouting and screaming and waving his arms, and he's a very quiet, pleasant guy when there's not a microphone in front of him. He's a little like Chuck Schumer in that sense. And I had mentioned this to Ray Kelley's son, Greg, and Greg said, my dad says the same thing about him. He'll come down to City Hall in New York or in front of the police department. He'll scream and he'll yell and he'll preen for the cameras, then walks into my dad's office and says, Ray, how's the wife and kids? And it's very calm. Sharpton, of all people, who you could say has helped foment this violence against police officers around the country, seems to be backing away. He was speaking at one of these rallies, these anti-police rallies the other day, and he had this to say, which sounds as if he's having second thoughts about what they're doing.
Randolph Holder's killing was a blow to all of us. And we who unapologetically fight bad policing we unapologetically support good police.
Randolph Holder was the New York City police officer executed last week by a small-time criminal who graduated to big-time crime. The problem is he's still at this rally and he's saying, well, we support good police. We just have issues with bad police. First of all, how do you know? You see a guy in uniform. How do you know if that guy's good or bad? Number one, that's a question I want to throw out there. Number two, if you spit in that police officer's face and he's a good cop and he happens to spit back or punch you, my guess is it'll be the latter, then he's not a bad cop for doing that. And a lot of these people out there who claim they have all of these issues with law enforcement, I meet people in life who've never had any issues with law enforcement. They may have been pulled over now and then, but it didn't turn into a great big brawl in the road. Nothing came of it. They might have gotten a ticket or a warning and off they went. But why is it some people always seem to have issues with police, and then they turn around and say, well, this is what the police are like? Maybe it's your own personality. There's a great line from comedian Bill Cosby was doing a stage show. It was on HBO back in the 1980s, and he was talking about he met some guy who did cocaine, and he says, why do you put that stuff in your body? And the guy says, because it enhances my personality. To which Bill Cosby said, yeah, but what if you're a bleep hole? And I thought, that speaks great volumes about that. A lot of people who are having Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, was a common criminal and a street thug. And if you go around trying to smack police officers and take their firearms, you could well end up having a problem with the cops. I'm sorry, it's not bad policing to respond to someone who's trying to kill you with necessary force, equal or greater. Bill Colley with you. We've got a few minutes left. Mike Gallagher is coming up in just a couple of minutes. I want to thank you for joining us today on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. In fact, Mike Gallagher, I want to point out, is brought to you exclusively by the financial advisors at Waddell & Reed right here in Twin Falls. Telephone number 736-6563. If you need someone, you need to sit down with them and plan out your retirement, 736-6563. Some countries were on the back of the line when they were passing out names. Guatemala happened to be one of them. Whenever I hear it, I always think it's a social disease. 9:54, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, as well as newsradio1310.com. The final minutes of our program. God willing, if the creek don't rise, they'll allow me to come back and do it all over again tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 o'clock. We have a guest tomorrow just after 9 o'clock news, Nikki Boyd. She is a candidate for Twin Falls City Council. We've got a dwindling number of these people still dropping by. Election Day, of course, coming up next Tuesday. And we'll have perhaps one other candidate in studio with us before we wrap up this week. If you'd like to reach our program, final minutes, 736-0300. That's 736-0300. I do want to at least mention one thing before we close out the show. We've been telling you over the last couple of weeks that Obamacare is slowly collapsing. There is now a general consensus coming out of Washington that whoever wins the presidential election in 2017, that they are going to have to sit down and come up with a better plan or a solution. Some of us think we should just go back to the old indemnity plans and have competition, but that might be too simple for the people in Washington because a lot of people are getting rich when it comes to all of the deals, sweetheart deals that are buried inside Obamacare. Robert King, writing at the Washington Examiner, says Obamacare insurers have been struggling with a shortfall of federal funds, which could lead to higher premiums for Obamacare plans, experts said. I saw yesterday some states are looking at 35% increases for premiums. So it was going to be free. I heard Rush Limbaugh saying that too yesterday. That's exactly what people thought. They thought that this was going to be free. Somebody else was going to pay your freight for you. Your neighbor. It's like our caller in the last hour. The fellow who struggles with English as a second language. There you go. There's a guy who thinks everybody else is supposed to take care of him, that we're supposed to have open borders, and because my ancestors worked hard to build the most powerful country in the world, that somehow I now have to give it to him because his ancestors built a narco-terrorist state. These are the type of people we have to deal with every day in this country, and they think somebody else is going to take care of it. Well, now they're going to get some shocks coming next year. The writer says the Affordable Care Act set up a risk corridor program to help insurers that take on too many sickened or older Americans. The law requires insurers to accept every applicant regardless of health status or pre-existing condition. Democrats don't understand that, running a healthcare company is actually a business. You have to pay salaries and you do have to make a profit, because if you don't, you'll go out of business. The program works, the writer says, by having insurers whose profits reach past a certain threshold paying into it, and the administration paying out to insurers that have big losses. Obamacare insurers requested about $3 billion in risk corridor payments for last calendar year, but only received $362 million, a mere 12% of what they were asking for. The shortfall happened because insurers requested more than what was paid into the program. Wynn Health, which provides coverage in neighboring Wyoming, went into receivership last week because of a low-risk corridor payment. It will suspend insurance sales next year, leaving over 8,000 people to search for a new plan for the sole remaining insurer in the Obamacare marketplace. We told you. We warned you. We kept saying this is a recipe for disaster, and yet Libby and Lefty and Democrat, they all went down the road together, and they jumped off the cliff like lemmings. The problem was they tethered themselves to the rest of us. When are they going to learn? Big government and run by bureaucrats far, far away is not a solution to a problem, if there ever was a problem. Rush Limbaugh will follow the news coming up at 10 o'clock this morning, Fox News. And, of course, after Fox News at 1 o'clock, Sean Hannity. Glenn Beck following 4 o'clock news. Dave Ramsey coming up between 7 and 10 o'clock tonight. Overnight, of course, you can always join us and you can hear George Norrie on Coast to Coast. And then tomorrow morning, Benito from 6 to 8 with AM Idaho. And then 22 scan hours and a short nap in between. I get to do it all over again. Thanks, everybody.